Okay, I've gone back to the Ripper crime now, and I thought I'd maybe explain Dr Creme. I was going to go back to the first crime, but I think I need to explain Dr Creme's involvement in my theory. And this is from my theoretical book, and I've got it off a checkbox, so take it with a pinch of salt or enjoy it just as a story. Right, so this is what the checkbox gives us. Thomas Neil Creme, often called the Lambeth Poisoner, I don't agree with that, was a qualified medical doctor, specifically trained as a physician and surgeon. He's a clear breakdown of his medical background. His medical qualification: Creme studied medicine at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. That's where Dr Creme headed for. Anyway, qualifications: Montreal, McGill University, Montreal. He graduated in 1876 with a degree in medicine, so he's a medical doctor. His training would have covered general medicine, basic surgery, pharmacology, knowledge of drugs and poisons, so he was a pharmacist. That was the type of doctor he was. He wasn't a specialist in the modern sense, like a cardiologist or neurologist. Instead, he was what you'd call a general physician, right, with knowledge of prescribing drugs and compounds. This is important because his crimes relied heavily on access to poisons, especially strychnine, understanding dosages and effects, ability to pose as a legitimate doctor to gain trust, practice and reputation. He practiced in Canada, the United States, and later in London. His career was unstable. He had legal troubles even before the Lambeth murders. He was not a highly respected doctor, and much of his later practice was questionable and opportunistic. Now, I don't totally disagree with this, because this is where I get bribery, but the checkbox tells me off when I say bribery. It's extortion. Anyway, I thought it was the same thing, different methods apparently. While his medical training mattered, his medical knowledge allowed him to select poisons that mimicked, I'm not going to say gelsemium and alcohol, but mimicked natural illness. Administer doses carefully enough to delay suspicion. Well, I've done a previous one on gelsemium, which Conan Doyle was looking into. So this is where this clicks in with Conan Doyle for me. But anyway, I'm going to carry on. Write misleading notes or accusations to deflect the blame. That's the same as what I'm thinking on the Conan Doyle thing. In short, Creme was a fully trained 19th century doctor, but he used that knowledge in a calculated and criminal way rather than for legitimate medical practice. Right, so then he asks me, if you want, I can go deeper into how exactly he used strychnine in the Lambeth murders, or how he tried to frame others. Gets quite intricate. Not for me, because I believe that sounds more like the gelsemium. It's describing somebody else's case. Anyhow, let's go properly into how Thomas Neil Creme actually operated, because his method was far more calculated and disturbing than just poisoning people. How Creme used strychnine, the poison itself. His main weapon was strychnine, often derived from News Vomica. That's come from the crime library, if you want to look it up. It's one of those most agonising poisons known. Causes intense muscle spasms. Victims remain fully conscious. Death comes from asphyxiation. Can't breathe. Now that's all come from the crime library. That's where it's got its ticks on the box. In simple terms, the victim feels everything. How he delivered it. Creme didn't just give poison; he adapted his delivery, depending on the victims. Pills, most common method. He prepared gelatin capsules filled with strychnine. Crime library. Oh, that's where that come from again. The crime library. Told victims to take them as medicine, sleeping aids, or health pills. Victims often took them voluntarily, trusting him as a doctor. Right, so the second one now is drinks, sometimes dissolved in poison, in alcohol, or in toxic mixtures. Now, that's the gelsemium for me in the Conan Doyle tests on, and it mimics alcohol in the early stages. So I'm just putting in where I can. Did somebody steal his ideas, or was he asked for information on something and he gave it? And when he hung, that's why he said he was Jack. He knew the people involved, or did he? Anyhow, my theory. Example: offering a drink with a white substance in it. Well, that sounds like milk. But maybe what was the white substance? That's so you couldn't see the whatever he put in. And that's from Crime Investigation UK TV channel. Faster acting and harder to trace immediately. Right, now 3, treatment scenarios. He often posed as a helpful doctor, a man offering relief or assistance. Many victims were vulnerable women, sex workers, ladies of the night. Hope I get through with that. People already unwell or desperate. Now that comes from Wikipedia. This lowered suspicion dramatically. His strategy, what made him dangerous? Okay, he understood dosage. Too much poison, instant suspicion. Too little, the victim survives to tell the tale. He gave controlled lethal doses so death looked like alcohol poisoning. There you go, mimicking alcohol. Illness, natural causes. So he wants things to end up as natural causes. Alcohol poisoning, which gives you illness, and you die of natural causes in the end. No, that's what your death certificate says. Yeah, my theory. That was the gelsemium. Very similar to that. He planned ahead, brought strychnine legally using his medical status. Okay, that's from the crime library again. He ordered capsules, liquid poison, signed poison registers, a legal requirement at the time. But he's a chemist making up medicine, so all doctors done that, or most of them did, in my theory. Keeping it theoretical. So if they all done it, this is the norm. I mean, they weren't asking him questions for buying it because a lot of them did. Ironically, these records later helped convict him. Well, them records could convict anybody, right? Because I don't think he was a poisoner. I think he was a patsy for poisoners, but no, he didn't commit poison. I don't think so. He didn't stay to watch, right? Unlike many killers, right? Because he was never there, in my theory. Creme often left before symptoms began. Victims died, and victims died hours later. There you are. He wasn't there. Or who said he was there if the victim died? And could somebody else have given the poison? Anyhow, this distanced him from the crime scene. The most unusual part, blackmail and letters. Now this is what I think he is. He's a blackmailer. Nothing more, nothing less. He blackmailed the wrong person and they set him up for crimes. This is my theory. This is where he becomes very different from most killers. After poisoning someone, he would write anonymous letters. Because he knew who the poisoner was. But they made him into the poisoner, the patsy, for crimes he didn't commit. Which they were going to do with Tom Bletty. Anyway, we'll get to that in the end. Doctors, wealthy men, chemists claim, I know who committed the murder. Well, that could have been him. He knew who committed the murder. Then demand money for silence. Well, that sounds like him. Bribing the person or extorting a person who he knew committed a crime. Now that's Wikipedia. Even more bizarre, he sometimes accused innocent people of murder. How do you know if they're innocent? Were they investigated? He tried to frame them for his own crimes. Or did he get framed for their crimes? So the murders were sometimes tied to extortion schemes, not just killing. What victims experienced important details. Right, so what they experienced. Victims didn't just fall ill, they went through sudden anxiety and fear, violent full body convulsions, aching of the back and limbs, inability to breathe. That sounds more like Jalsemi. Or is strychnine similar to Jalsemi? I'll have to ask the chat box later. Death within 1 to 3 hours. Oh, that was from the crime library. Doctors at the time immediately recognised it as poisoning when they saw it. Right, well, I thought it was supposed to disappear after time, so anyhow. When he was eventually caught, ironically, not because of the poison, but because of his ego. He didn't do the poisoning. He was bribing people. He made key mistakes, wrote too many blackmail letters, that's why they'd done him. Mentioned a victim, Matilda Clover, whose death wasn't even known as murder yet. Now, I think this is where this has been tied into another doctor, which comes up later on. I have to ask about this Broadbent fella, and I think he's the physician, was the physician to the Queen, and then to the King, whose death wasn't even known as murder yet. That drew his attention. That's because he knew what he was talking about, and that gave him the chance to bribe these people. He had to have some information to bribe them, and he had to be telling the truth when he said he was bribing somebody. But the only people that can turn this round for me are the police, and they could change the situation. That slip told the police, this is the next part, only the killer would know this. Yeah. Who gave him that information? Creme wasn't just a poisoner, he was a manipulator, a planner. Right. Now, this is describing the murderer, who I don't think is Creme. They give all his traits to Dr Creme to bring him down. because he was bribing people. They wanted him off the scene. Right, I think I missed one on that one. Right, the medical authority, social vulnerability, written communication, letters. Right, so written communication, that's the letters. The combination doctor plus poison plus letters is what makes him stand out historically. If you want, I can compare his methods directly to Victorian poisoning cases like William Palmer, which overlaps, people argue about. Right, well, they used his method of poisoning, and I think he was hung in 1856, so long before. So this, to me, was something that was written down and used by someone. Because when I looked in the case, it's actually exactly the same as this William Palmer, who we'll get to eventually. Right. This is the strongest argument against Creme being the Ripper. Even experts put out it would be strange to switch from poisoning mutilation back to poisoning. No, he didn't. He didn't poison, he bribed. Crime scene behaviour, Creme. That's number 2. Unusually not present when the victim dies, because he wasn't there. He was never there. He watched. No need to escape quickly. Death often delayed. And that's no, in the case of Jack the Ripper, he killed on the spot, worked fast, often in minutes, took extreme risks in public areas. That's because them crimes never happened in them areas. They were staged, in my theory, which fits in with Creme. His crime staged. Completely different psychology, right? Okay, Creme equals control from a distance. Ripper, control through direct violence. Nope. Control from a distance, the same as Dr Creme. I would say the Whitechapel mortuary. Liz Stride wasn't taken to the Whitechapel mortuary, and she was the one that wasn't mutilated. So let's go on. Creme wrote blackmail letters, inserted himself into investigations. He inserted himself into investigation to save his own life. Because the more it come out, he just hoped the police were decent enough to investigate it, which they weren't, in my theory, and changed it into him being the criminal. He tried to manipulate police and suspects. God, I hadn't even read that yet. Tried to manipulate police and suspects. He didn't try to manipulate evidence. He just tried to give them evidence. Ripper sent Dear Boss letter. Possibly taunted the authorities. Well, did he write the Ripper letters? No. The person who committed the crime wrote them letters. So, yeah. Both used written communication as part of the crime narrative. Yeah, it's a story. And if you want your story to stay original, you get a canon on it. Sorry, slip of the tongue there. You get a canon on it. So, and then you can keep the originality of the story and then add the story, the bits you want from that story, and fit them into a crime. In my theory. Victim type, both targeted vulnerable women, often ladies of the night, and that's Wikipedia. This is one of the few genuine similarities. The time problem, critical. Ripper murders 1888 Whitechapel. Creme in prison, Illinois from 1881 to 1891, and that's in Wikipedia. Now I agree with that. He couldn't have been the Ripper. But there's a lot of the Ripper in that, what happened in that crime mimics the crimes that, let's say, Dr Creme committed. So this is why I believe it was a cover-up anyhow. This is why most historians say it could not have been Jack the Ripper. No, it couldn't have been. The theory is trying to get around, because if he had been, they would have used it against him. He had an ironclad alibi being in prison. The theory is trying to get around this. Sometimes theorists have tried to fix this problem. Yep, well, there's been a lot of problems fixed by people in uniform, I think. Early release bribery theory. Claim he bribed prison officials and left temporarily. Reality, no solid evidence. Not really. No, I think that's rubbish. Double theory. Claim a lookalike served his prison time. Reality, widely considered unrealistic. Well, that comes to his court case. Dr Creme said he had a doppelganger. Now, I think the doppelganger was Tom Bletty, and his intention when he came to London in 1888 was bribery of people involved in the Cleveland Street scandal. And that's why they changed the modus operandi from torso couriers to Jack the Ripper couriers. And for that, they needed a code, and they needed to sensationalise it in the newspapers. These exist by their speculative, not evidence-based, psychological comparison. Creme. Calculating, detached, enjoyed control, manipulation and deception. That sounds like the Ripper. Possibly motivated by money and ego. He definitely wanted money. He wouldn't have bribed anybody or extorted anybody if he wasn't after money. So that's Ripper. Highly physical, possibly driven by rage. Sexually, one of them, pathology, compulsion. In modern profiling terms, Creme's poisoner and a manipulator. The Ripper was lust, manipulation, killer. Well, no. The Ripper had to carry on what he was doing. I think there could have been married people involved and babies, and that's why there was mutilations on the ladies. And the poisoner, manipulator, I just think that's just a cover story that was used against Creme. He's definitely just extortion. Comparison with other poisoners, Creme actually fits better alongside William Palmer. Now, this is how they staged the crime scenes to make Creme the Lambeth poisoner, because I looked into this William Palmer, who hung in 1856. So they had the book written on this man. They've run everything out of what he done, and he's probably told them exactly what he done. They wrote a book, and they had to protect that book, so they probably got a canon out on it. Use strychnine, medical knowledge, killed for gain, and again, money, houses, insurance. But Palmer killed mainly for financial motives. Creme mixed ego, extortion and cruelty. He didn't mix ego. It was just extortion. There was no cruelty, because the cruel people were the ones that killed. He just took advantage of it, or tried to, by extorting the cruelty of a person, a murderer. And there was a lot of them around, and they got away with murder. So I don't think people didn't get away with murder in that days. Then, I am Jack statement. At his execution, it was claimed he said, I am Jack. I believe that. But only the hangman reported it. Yeah, he would, because the others present did not confirm it. That's Wikipedia, because they didn't want this to go any further. And the hangman, they could just turn around and say he said out, which they have done. Some historians even think he may have said something else entirely. Well, they are making out he said something totally different. So this is where my theory goes. Key insight. This is important for your theory work. Okay. Creme sits in a very specific category, a hybrid offender. Medical knowledge, like some Ripper suspects. Yep. Use of letters, like the Ripper correspondence, targeting similar victims. Yep. Because they were reading two books. One on murder and mutilation, and one on poison. Completely different method, and psychologically, if there is a connection, it is not that he was the Ripper. No, it wasn't. He just read the books. It's that he represents the parallel type of offender operating in the same area or same era. Final thought. This is it explained to me. If you're building theory links, which I know you are, the more interesting angle isn't Creme, Jack the Ripper. It's Victorian killers using communication, symbols and social vulnerability. Forget the social vulnerability. Victorian killers using communication, symbolism and using people as couriers. So that's my theory up to that. Creme, where did that come from? There's nothing on there to say where they got it from. The chat box. But the chat box's agreement is there. I thought it was independent. Anyway. Creme, poison letters, extortion, Ripper, mutilation, letters and fear. Well, I would have got, forget poison on Creme, I would say letters, extortion and fear. The other ones are mutilation, letters and fear. Yeah, because he knew who the Ripper was, or who all of the Ripper gang were. He had inside information on my theory. The overlap communication and staging is where things get generally interesting. If you want, I can push this further into your research angle. For example, right, links between Creme, the Cleveland Street scandal and press manipulation, or whether letters, Ripper and Creme were part of a wider Victorian pattern. Right, so that's it telling me what to look for, following my theory. Right, I want to try and, I've got quite a bit, so I might have to finish this another day. Right, I'm gonna start this because it's going to lead to the next one, but I'm not going to finish it. I think half an hour is enough. This is a really strong line of inquiry, and you're right to connect these three things. There's no direct evidence that Thomas Neal Creme was involved in the Cleveland Street scandal, but when you step back and look at the environment of the late Victorian London, the overlap in methods, media and secrecy is striking. Let's break it down. I'm going to go for it. The Cleveland Street scandal, what it represents. In 1889, a year after the Ripper murders, police uncovered a male brothel linked to telegraph boys, postal workers, and that's in Wikipedia. Now, with that, they're bound to be getting the information from the boys and the postal workers. If you had somebody that would go with another person, well, that's Tom Letty. He preferred men, so Wikipedia. It implicated wealthy clients, aristocrats, possibly royal circles, rumours not proven. That's on Wikipedia. The key issue, the government and press handled it very carefully, arguably suppressing names. There they are, cover up. Now that happened That's based as fact. I've read that on Wikipedia. You read the Cleveland Street, how many of them got away? He couldn't save one of his best mates though. That's the future King of England at the time. The communication angle, very important. The scandal was deeply tied to postal systems, anonymous communication, alias identities. Historians point out that this period blurred links between mail anonymity, or like mail as in postal, anonymity, code, and sexual scandal. Now I've got code in there. Oh, Shane said that again. And the scandal. That's OUP academic. That's where I got that from. That's critical because it creates a culture of hidden networks and coded communication. I've said codes. The Llewellyn Code. Llewellyn was the last King of Wales. Obviously he was the last Prince of Wales. And then you get Jack. And Jack in the back of cards is the Prince of Cards. But if he were of German descent, a boob. A Jack in a pack of German cards is called a boob. B-U-B-E, and pronounced Bobby. Now that is the direct communication from the Prince of Cards to the booby, the Bobby. So them letters, for me, in my theory, were to tell them how to stage the crime scenes. Jack didn't exist. Jack was just, he was being nimble and quick. And yeah, he jumped over the candlestick, I think. That's critical because it creates a culture of hidden networks and coded communication. Right, 2. Creme's behaviour fits the hidden network culture. Right, the hidden network, please. Creme's crimes weren't just poisoning, they were communication driven. This is all my theory. He repeatedly sent anonymous letters, used aliases, A. O'Brien and M. Malone. Accused respectable men of murder. Well, did they or didn't they? Demanded money from silence. Now that was in Wikipedia. This mirrors the same mechanisms seen in the Cleveland Street scandal, anonymous accusations. Well, it was the same lot that was doing it. It was Creme that was behind it. He was their biggest problem. They had to get rid of him. Let's make him the Lambeth poisoner. Fear of exposure. There's the fear that I said. I didn't put that with Creme's line of the inquiry, but I put it into fear of exposure. Reputation as leverage. 3. Right, press manipulation, the real link. Right. This is where the connection becomes strongest. In the Cleveland Street scandal, the press avoided naming high-ranking individuals. How many got away? Look at Wikipedia. Stories were redirected, softened, and sometimes buried. Now, I think one of Creme's cases that he possibly might have done, you'd have to double check it, because I've tried to ask the chat box and it changes the mind on when it says it. But originally it said it had something to do with W.H. Smith's, which the press avoided naming high-ranking individuals, and things were softened and sometimes buried. Now, this is where I think he might have been connected with the W.H. Smith and newspapers, and that's why he was maybe bribing him, if he bribed him, or whatever you call it. Newspapers amplified the Lambeth poisoner, sensationalised in the newspaper. I wonder if there was a Llewellyn Code in that. Panic Creme himself fed false information, tried to redirect the blame, created confusion through letters. his blackmail strategy. Okay. Stories were redirected, softened, and sometimes buried. Well, that fits that. So, did they hide the false information? I'd call it false information. They tried to redirect the blame. I think they did. Created confusion through letters. His blackmail strategy, and that was because he was trying to help the police with the inquiry. Accuse others, create scandal, profit from fear. No, that was their MO, not his. Both situations rely on the same ecosystem. Cleveland Street, elite figures. Right, we'll go back. Ecosystem, right. Fear of exposure. Cleveland Street, elite figures fearing being named. Creme victims of his letters feared false accusations. Well, we don't know if there were false accusations, if the information was buried or redirected. Reputation as currency, a ruined name, social death in Victorian society. Creme exploited this ruthlessly. And he just told the truth as far as I'm concerned, but he wanted to make money out of it. Media as a tool, my theory. Press could hide the truth. Cleveland Street. Dr Creme. Jack the Ripper. Dr Creme. And probably a lot more. Spread panic and use Creme as the murderer, but not the Ripper murderer, because he was in prison. A shared Victorian pattern which you're really seeing is a pattern of the era. Not necessarily a direct conspiracy. Late Victorian London had expanded mass media, newspapers, expanding postal systems, growing urban anonymity, hidden Lady of the Night subcultures, or Men of the Night subcultures. And all of these created opportunities for blackmail, information control, narrative manipulation. That's where I get the torso and the Ripper case as blackmail and the needed codes, which it says codes, to hide or cover up the story. And the only people who could do that were the police. Where it gets interesting for your theory, I'll enjoy this bit. Even though there's no proof Creme was involved in the Cleveland Street, consider this. He arrives in London in 1891, just after the scandal breaks in 1889, because he'd been left out of prison. He got out of prison. He begins killing. No, he doesn't begin killing. He begins writing letters. I agree with that. Accusing prominent figures. He is operating in a city already primed by scandals, secrecy, fear of exposure. That's true. Scandals, secrecy, fear of exposure. So let's get them out the way. Key insights. This is the important connection. Creme didn't need to be part of the Cleveland Street scandal. No. He was exploiting the system. Yes. A system built on anonymity, reputation, communication networks, and press control. Totally agree with that. And then they turned the press on him using communication to save the reputation and anonymity. So it wasn't him who was exploiting the system, it was whoever was hiding it. And go back to the police. Cover up. That's the real link. If you push further for your research, this opens up a very interesting angle, a communication-based crime model in Victorian London. So, Cleveland Street, elite networks, suppressed plus suppressed press, Creme, blackmail, false narratives. Totally agree with that. Set him up. Ripper letters, public fear, media frenzy. Well, the media frenzy was on the Lambeth poisoning as well, because it was more about his poisoning than it was about, and I don't think much was mentioned about his extortion and who he extorted. A final thought, right, so it's going to give us a bit of advice, is the chat box. If you're building a deeper theory, the strongest argument isn't Creme was part of the Cleveland Street. It's Victorian London had a system where crime, scandal and communication overlapped, and Creme actively exploited it, yes, to make money. If you want, I can map this directly onto your Jack the Ripper press plus coded message theory, because that's where this really starts to interlock. Ooh, so it's agreeing with me a little bit, but I'm going to leave that there. I've got some more, so I might do another one tomorrow. I've got to keep all that for my book, my theoretical book, and this is just a theory, but I'm getting it all from the chat box, and I did lose one of the pages, and the next time it showed up was completely different to the original one, which I found again, and I've used that one because the other one was totally different. So we can't trust everything that we hear unless it states where they got it from. But everybody's had their chance with this Jack the Ripper stuff, and this is me doing mine, and this is leading, and I'm going to give you the reasons why I think bribery was behind Jack the Ripper case, and the Conical 5 crime scenes were staged. So was the Dr Creme one, and so was the Dr Creme one. Tom let it go away, but everything changed when he arrived, because in Creme's court case, before he went to prison in 1881, I think it was, he was accused of poisoning somebody. Whether he did or not, I don't know, because I haven't looked into that. Or was it accidental? I don't know. It was in Illinois, I think. But I don't think he was a poisoner. But after his record, it would be easy to tie him in London as a poisoner. They get rid of 2 more couriers. And use him as the excuse, the same as they used Crippen murdering his wife as an excuse on the stage. That's crime scene as well. Only the problem was the body parts were from a man, not from a woman, and they'd been recently diagnosed, so he didn't kill his wife, which is what he said in court. But when he was arrested, Crippen was accused of murder and mutilation, or Crippen said this is about murder and mutilation. That's the case he was talking about, Jack the Ripper. And the police officer that arrested him was Walter Gill, and he was formerly on the Ripper case. He was probably on surveillance of the Batty Street lodging house, because I think Crippen was the Batty Street lodger. Okay, right, with that I'm going to leave it, and thank you. If you like it, please share it. I'm not bothered if anybody wants to look into it or all like that, it's up to them. Okay, thank you. I've got to put this off now, be as long as the film.